2023 horror films. Going through the horror from this past year, we actually had a really good year for horror. It made picking a top five even harder than I wanted it to be. I kept going over this list, I kept replacing movies, I kept swapping movies, but now I think I have right now, I'm okay with my top five best horror movies of the year. I have some honorable mentions that I should mention really quick. We have Insidious The Red Door. Since I wasn't a fan of Insidious 3 and 4, I was glad that for the fifth movie they brought back the original actors and the family from the first two films, and that we did a continuation that didn't upset me, right? It wasn't like we brought back characters and actors that I liked and just killed them off or just did dumb stuff with them. No, I thought the story was decent and I thought the scares was good as well. Thanksgiving, an Eli Roth fake trailer that I had been wanting to be turned into a real movie for so long. And we finally got it. Now, yeah, maybe it wasn't as amazing as the fake trailer was, right? If it was, it would be in the top five. But I thought it was still solid enough. I thought it still had some good stuff in there. No One Will Save You was a really different type of film, and it was clearly low budget, but they did a lot with what they had, and I liked the main actress in this movie. The Last Voyage of Demeter. I think this movie has been slept on a little bit. Not a lot of people either are talking about it or even watched this movie. I think if you saw it, you would enjoy it. It's very dark, though. There's a lot of effed up kills. Evil Dead Rise. I wanted to put this higher, actually on my list, because this movie ended up being way better than I thought it would. Anytime Evil Dead comes back after all of these years, it's always a question on, are they going to be able to do something that feels fresh with it, not feel like rehash. And also, this is without Bruce Campbell, the Ash character, but this was solid. This told a cool story of this family that just so many messed up things happened to all of them. But let's jump into the real list, shall we? Top five, starting with number five, Megan. Now, maybe Megan making the top five sounds surprising because it is a sillier movie. It is kind of a goofier movie. I'm not saying it was all that scary. I just had fun with this movie. I enjoyed it, and it was one of the first movies from this past year in January. Didn't have high expectations. I had fun. I enjoyed it. I've rewatched it a few times since. Number four, Scream 6. I kind of wish this was higher just because it is a Scream movie. Scream is my favorite horror movie of all time, and so obviously I'm going to be a little more biased to Ghostface as a killer and bringing back the characters that we brought back for this. And I think the actresses, especially the two leads, the sisters, I guess we won't be seeing any more of them, at least not anytime soon, but I think the second movie, they were at their best. And yeah, my biggest complaint about this film, and probably why it's not higher, is because I didn't really care for the reveal of the killers, or at least the killer's motivation, or how it was handled. It felt like massive retread. But everything else about the movie, I thought it was very violent. I thought some of the kills were one of the most brutal kills from the Scream films. I loved them being in New York to switch up the environments a little bit. Number three, Talk to Me. Here's a movie that completely came out of nowhere for me. Didn't expect much from it. I remember getting continuous emails to go to a free screening for it, and I just said, not really that interested in it. Now I wish I did go, because after finally watching it, I thought, man, this movie was different. This movie knew how to tell a ghost story or a paranormal like story, but did it differently. In some parts, it had fun with the kids making it into a game and it just being a thing that everyone ended up doing in this town, but also how our main character becomes so obsessed because her loss of her mother and how deep she ends up going, how messed up things happen to some of the characters and it's their fault, but you also feel bad for them. And then the ending was very depressing, it was very dark, it was very sad that it stuck with me for quite some time. Number 2, Saw X, a movie that did not have the right to be as good as it was. Even if you saw X and you didn't think, oh, it was all that good, or I wouldn't have it in my top 5, I get that. I do. I'm a little partial to the Saw franchise, another franchise that I hold near and dear to my heart. Those first few movies, I loved going to the theaters every Halloween to check out a Saw film. But the last few Saw movies, and I mean the last few Saw films, have been disappointing, has been the law of diminishing returns. It just seemed like they had run out of ideas and they were recycling stuff that just was not working for me. Then you come back to what we knew and love. It was such a smart move to do a prequel story taking place between Saw 1 and Saw 2, giving us the excuse to bring back our fan favorite characters like Jigsaw, Tobin Bell himself, and Amanda, Shawnee Smith. This was great, and this is the first Saw film where they're actually the main characters. They're the protagonists. We're following them the entire way through. And just the idea of a couple of fake doctors or fake insurance people who just were being assholes, ripping off vulnerable people, and having Jigsaw go after them for revenge. I really like that setup. But for my number 1, yet another film that caught me by surprise, another movie that came out of nowhere, Totally Killer. Was, I think, an Amazon Prime film, I think. And so when I watched it, I love to have fun, Yeah, I like horror movies that are taken serious. And yeah, sometimes I don't like an overly goofy horror movie, but there are a lot of times where if you take a horror film and add some fun to it, add just enough comedy to where I can enjoy myself all the way through, that's what I got with Totally Killer. In my review, I instantly thought of this is like Scream meets Back to the Future. A lot because it's a mass killer, which is my favorite genre of a horror film, a mass killer, but also the Back to the Future route with our main character going back in time to try to save her teenage mom from her and her friends being brutally killed by this killer. I mean, such a great idea, such a great situation to put the main character from. It reminded me a lot of this other horror movie from a few years ago, Final Girls, that had a similar thing going on. And so being so surprised by how much I enjoyed this film, I think that's why I had to say this is at the top of my list. So guys, let me know in the comments below, what are your top favorite horror movies of 2023? What do you think of my list? What's your favorite? Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later.